Okay, so this lesson is about solving absolute value equations. So before that, we have to know some properties of absolute value and the definition of absolute value. So what the absolute value of a number is that number's distance from 0. So if I'm talking about the number 4, the absolute value of 4 means how far away from 0 is 4. 4 is 4 away from 0. That is its distance from 0. On the flip side, the absolute value of negative 4. Negative 4 is 4 units away from 0, so the absolute value of negative 4 is 4. So, the absolute value of a number is always greater than or equal to 0. Okay? The absolute value of a negative number is equal to the absolute value of the opposite of that number. When I multiply two absolute values, or when I multiply two numbers, the absolute value of two numbers, it's like multiplying each of their absolute values by each other. The same holds for dividing. So with absolute value equations, as long as our equation, or one of our sides of the equation, is not equal to 0, we have to set up two separate solutions. Because, like I showed you at the top, the absolute value of a number can be the absolute value of a positive number or the absolute value of a negative number. So I'm going to show you how to set up those two equations. Okay? So, to set these equations up, we're saying the absolute value of x minus 4 is 6. That means whatever is inside of this, that means x minus 4 could be 6. X minus 4 could also be negative 6. Because I'm saying the absolute value of 6 is 6. The absolute value of negative 6 is also 6. So I'm going to solve this. Add 4 to both sides. X could be 10. That is one of our possible solutions. I solve the other equation. I add 4 to both sides. X is negative 2. So those are our two solutions. And the reason these are both solutions is because 10 minus 4 is 6. The absolute value of 6 is 6. Negative 2 minus 4 is negative 6. The absolute value of negative 6 is 6. So that one, we would set up two equations. We would get two solutions for that. Okay? In the next example, since our absolute value is set equal to a negative number, that means that this equation has no solutions because it's saying the result of absolute value is negative. That is never true. The absolute value of a number has to be 0 or greater, 0 or a positive number. So if your equation is set equal to a positive number, you set up and solve two equations. One set equal to that number, one set equal to its opposite, the negative version of that number. If your absolute value is set equal to a negative number, it has no solutions. That equation has no solutions. So this is a good chance for you to try this with some guided practice. Try to work through them. If you're stuck, just wait for my solutions. But it's a good chance for you to pause the video and work through these independently. Okay, so for these three examples, the absolute value of x is 10. So it's saying the absolute value of which numbers is 10. And if you think about it, it should make sense. The absolute value of 10 is 10, so 10 is a solution. The absolute value of negative 10 is also 10, so negative 10 is also a solution. In the next example, number 2, x minus 1, the absolute value of that is 4. So that means the result of this absolute value could be 4 or negative 4. So that's why I set up these two equations. I solve x minus 1 is 4, I get x is 5. I solve x minus 1 is negative 4, x could be negative 3. So those are two solutions to that equation. For number 3, our absolute value is set equal to a negative number, so that means it's not possible, so that is why I say no solutions. There is no need to solve that, because the absolute value of something cannot be negative. The result of an absolute value has to be positive. So, in example 2. When we look at this equation, I look at it and I say, oh wow, it's set equal to a negative. That means no solutions. I don't have to do any work. But this one is different because my absolute value has something else on that side of the equation. So in the last few examples you noticed, it was just the absolute value of something, some expression, equal to a number. Now it's our absolute value of something with an operation acted on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to isolate this absolute value, meaning I'm going to get rid of everything that is not inside the absolute value. So I would get rid of this negative 10 or this minus 10, and I would get rid of that by adding it to both sides. So this would be the absolute value of 3x plus 9 equals negative 4 plus 10 is 6. Okay, so now I can set up my two equations to solve because my absolute value is equal to just a single number. So I'm going to set up my two equations here. 3x plus 9 could be equal to 6, and 3x plus 9 could be equal to negative 6. So when I solve this first equation, I subtract 9. 3x equals negative 3. I divide both sides by 3. One of my solutions is x is negative 1. My other solution, I subtract 9. 3x equals negative 15. I divide by 3. X could also be negative 5. So it has two solutions. So make sure you are knowing what to do to isolate that absolute value. So since this was subtracting 10, I got rid of it by adding 10. If this were plus 10, I would have subtracted 10. Sometimes there will be a number multiplied on the front. The way I get rid of that number multiplied on the front is I divide both sides by that number. So I've got 3 guided practice problems I want you guys to try. Okay? I'd actually like you to try just 4 and 5. If you want to try 6, go ahead, but 6 is more of a challenge. So I'd like you to pause the video and try these, and then once you're ready, start the video back up to reveal my answers, and then I'll kind of explain through them. Okay, to start with number 4, I had my absolute value of x minus 2. I had 5 being added to it, so I isolated the absolute value by subtracting 5 from both sides. From there, I could solve this because my absolute value is set equal to a positive number. So that's why I set up the 4 and negative 4, those two equations. That's important to remember to set up two equations, okay? So I isolated the absolute value and I set up my two equations. In the next one, I didn't show you how to do one like this, but this was 4 times the absolute value. So I divided both sides by 4. I got absolute value of 2x plus 7 is equal to 4. So that allowed me to set up my equation where it was set equal to 4 and negative 4. And then I got my solutions negative 3 halves and negative 11 halves. So you can get fractions. Just make sure you're setting up your two equations when you need to. And then in the last example, okay, I had minus 3 and I had it multiplied by negative 2. So the first thing I did was I added 3 to both sides, okay? And then the second thing I did was I divided both sides by negative 2. So I got absolute value of 5x minus 1 equals 4. That allowed me to set that absolute value, or set that expression, equal to 4 and negative 4. So I got my solutions were 1 and negative 3/5. So it's important that you take your time and that you understand what I mean when I say isolate the absolute value. So you're going to get a couple of chances to practice that before you take the checkpoint. We are going to finish our last lesson next week and then take our quiz after that so we can start our next unit before the Thanksgiving break. So you can move on to the next step in the lesson, which is most likely some independent practice.